Well, welcome everyone, faith believers, patriots alike. Welcome to the grid. Shaun, good to visit with you today.
Hey, good to see you, Chris.
So today, what are we talking about?
Today we are talking about George Soros and election interference because, baby, it is happening. It's not a myth.
It's not a myth. And I think when we think about the 2020 election, what does election interference mean? So there's, I would say one end of the spectrum here where there was some evidence in some places that votes were outright illegally cast and assimilated and used to swing the election. And then we have on the other end of the spectrum what I would call more the conspiracy. In fact, we did talk a little bit about the cartel, the sort of the collusion that occurs between media and the Democratic Party and liberal progressives, and kind of that group that has this agenda where they may not be doing anything illegal, but they're certainly colluding. And so, to me, election interference falls in that entire bucket from one end to the other. And but today we're talking about something in particular that it's got me very nervous. It's got me very nervous because we're still a few months away from the election, and this has the potential to have significant impact, what I would call significant election interference, electoral interference that might even go beyond what is legal but unethical and might even get into the illegal activity.
I'm so sorry. I immediately thought of one of the articles that I read related to this, where George Soros and his Goonies have already purchased a network of conservative radio stations that are Hispanic. So he's already done this. And so I was lost in my thought about that, and I completely missed your question.
Well, actually, I didn't have a question. That's a great segue though into because what you're talking about is Univision, that he had
Yes.
purchased Univision. Well, now we find out that in February, Soros Fund Management actually purchased $400 million of debt in Audacy, Audacy. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, which turns out to be the number 2 U.S. broadcaster after iHeartMedia. And apparently, this organization, Odyssey, is in bankruptcy proceedings, and so that's how Source's fund has come in, as they're buying up that debt to try to, in essence, buy it at a discount. Well, how big is this organization, Shaun? It's 220 stations that reaches 165 million listeners on a monthly basis. Now, to put that in perspective, that's half the country. That means the radio station is touching the equivalent of half the country every month. Does that raise some eyebrows, Shaun?
It certainly does raise some eyebrows, especially considering that one of those radio stations is in the good old Houston area.
Oh, didn't even realize that. Some of the
Mhm.
shows on that particular station include Eric Erickson. I believe isn't Eric with Red State, if I remember correctly, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, as they call the great one, and Dana Loesch. All of these folks are actually part of this network. And there's a lot of speculation that once Soros has what I would say is controlling interest in the company, that anything to do with those conservative radios, that'll be sold off, that'll be parsed off, that the organization itself will be completely disconnected from anything that could be construed as conservative, right wing, or even anti-progressive liberal. Does that concern you, Shaun?
It does greatly concern me because Soros has enough money that he can afford to blow $400 million in order to tear something to pieces and then have nothing and lose all $400 million of it. But it's money well spent because it helps him complete his mission.
It does, and it's very, very concerning to me. And an anonymous source said, I'm just quoting here, the idea that George Soros is buying hundreds of local radio stations right before a national election and will keep broadcasting Sean Hannity and other conservative talk radio hosts on Audacy is not credible. that's a very kind way of saying, yeah, it ain't going to happen. There's definitely some collusion here. Well, where does that collusion begin and where does it end? Of course, we've known for years Soros. By the way, everybody uses that name, so I'm going to digress for a minute. Does everybody understand that George Soros is not an American citizen, that he is Hungarian, and he has this global view to change the world, and so he invests in all of these, what I would say, more local elections. So he's very well known in the United States for contributing through his various PACs, his various political action committees, and other, I would say, tiered funds where it's not him directly making the contribution, contributing to all kinds of liberal district attorneys. It's happened in Florida. Now, Florida's effectively dealt with it because Ron DeSantis put his foot down and says, if you're not going to follow the law, DA, then I will remove you, in which he's done. But you got a place like New York, where he backs these DAs, and they end up not prosecuting murders, violent crime, but they prosecute things like, oh, I don't know, potential falsification of business records against a presidential candidate. A lot of people don't realize Alvin Bragg is one of these. His campaign was in part funded by one of these Soros groups, and it's happened all over the country. So it's very interesting to me that what Soros has done, and I don't know why he has such an interest in the United States, maybe because we're the dominant power and he has a worldview that he is looking to change. He's gone after, instead of being involved always at a national level, he's involved at the local level. And he's truly, truly using millions and millions of dollars at the grassroots level. Well, to me, this is another indirect way. Instead of just funding money to a campaign, why does he need to do that if he just owns the media? If he owns the media, he controls the narrative. So as we kind of walk through that, where does this collusion go? So sorry, Shaun, that was a little bit of a diatribe. What I'm in particular very interested in this conversation is the FCC. Now, the FCC has significant jurisdiction over a transaction like this. Is that right, Shaun?
That is 100% correct.
And the members of the FCC, Shaun, are you aware at how they come to their post? It's a committee. I believe there's 5 of them. Are you aware how they come to their post?
I am not. I'm sure I've heard it before, but I don't recall.
I believe they are appointed by the administration. And would it surprise you, Shaun, that the FCC right now has a Democratic majority on that particular agency? Okay, Shaun just fell over. Quickly ordered the CPR. Clearly the shock is
You're
overwhelming him.
kidding. The Democrats are in charge. The cartel is in charge.
The cartel's in charge.
So here's me going off on a really quick rabbit trail. Why doesn't somebody go after Soros for RICO?
Because you can't go after Rico if he's not an American citizen. That's the problem. So you've got Fannie Willis in Georgia going after Trump for RICO but it's because he's an American citizen, and George Soros is not. So right now, the way the rules exist, he can make all these foreign contributions, which actually that's kind of what I wanted to highlight anyway, Shaun, was foreign contributions. According to current FCC rules, a foreign entity is not permitted to exceed ownership more than 25% in an American media company. That makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
It does make sense to me. And what also makes sense to me is that we need to put a stop to that nonsense. It should be 0.
Yeah. So, and I'm guessing, Shaun, that the reason that's in place is exactly what we're saying, is to prevent foreign influence on the American media market. Now, there's other ways that happens. China is the inventor of TikTok, and that has taken the U.S. by storm and has been incredibly harmful. And it's 100% Chinese owned. So it's kind of avoiding that. This is a little different, though, because the content is all American. It's all conservatives and liberals and everybody having a voice on all these different radio stations. Then you have somebody come in who owns it and says, we're going to shut down one side of that voice, AKA a free speech issue. So in this case, George Soros, he can't get controlling interest unless he has more than 25%. You just can't control a company if you only have 25%. But in this case, by purchasing the debt that he is, it's going to be more than 40%. So under existing rules, that is illegal. He cannot do that. The only way he can do it is if the FCC grants an exemption. And that is the basis of what we're seeing, because the FCC right now is fast tracking the exemption process. Should that have me concerned, Shaun?
It should, because again, this is election interference. But of course, according to the cartel, they abide by the law. And so, no, it's not really election interference. It's, investing or something wackadoo.
Yeah, exactly. So Chip Roy, the Republican in Texas, actually wrote to the FCC in late April claiming that, hey, this Soros group is trying to waive the usual process. It's trying to put that process, that waiver process, off well down the road, and basically after, or that decision to be made after two things have happened. Number one, he's gained the controlling interest, and number two, that the election is over. That's what the Soros group is trying to do, is because they're trying to make sure that all of these decisions, even if it comes down not in his favor, it doesn't matter because the damage is done. Well, the FCC is saying things like this. The FCC should not create a special Soros shortcut. But by allowing this to be delayed, that's actually exactly what they're doing. So Soros is trying to fast track the waiver process. But in reality, what they're trying to do is to get the waiver up front, but the real decision making pushed off well down the road until the election is over.
Well, and to add to that, Brent Bozell with the Media Resource Center also filed a lawsuit, or filed something. He filed something with the FCC on Tuesday, June 18, to join Chip Roy.
So I think there's MRC, Brent Bozell, I believe, correct?
Correct.
And so, yeah, so there's been some pushback. What's amazing to me is that in all this age of secrecy, I mean, this stuff is all very clandestine. This stuff is trying to be done behind the scenes. It's just amazing to me that we even got wind of it, quite frankly. But I think the point that we need to be aware of is that election interference is real. It's here. It's here now. And we're seeing it right here. Now, if you think that, hey, he technically doesn't have interest, he's not shutting things down yet, I mean, so it's not really here. Shaun, we have a very personal story on the grid where the election interference has arrived. Would you care to share?
I certainly can. Our last podcast, World on Fire, you posted the link in Facebook, which is something that you usually do, and they took it down. And they sent you a little nasty. It was very polite, but it was a notice. And they did the same thing, correct me if I'm wrong, to the short that you produced and that we posted on Thursday. So the short was like 6-7 minutes long, and it was just one single subject, and you were responding to something, and it was really cool. It got yanked as well. And so that just kind of ticked me off. So I posted it to Facebook because I'd forgotten to, and I used a different set of wordings, made it briefer, but posted the link, and there it was. And within an hour, they took it down.
So what is interesting about this, Shaun, is that the second short that you're talking about is actually where I was answering the question that wasn't asked directly of me, but it was asked, if a man is so immoral and has done all these important things on tape like Trump has, how could you vote for him? And my response is, I'm not voting for the man, I'm voting for the platform. And that at the end of the day, when I look at traditionally biblical Judeo-Christian values and you compare the two platforms, it's just not a comparison. It's just not. We can talk all day long about good people, bad people, which, this party is corrupt, this party. At the end of the day, though, the platforms that they openly say, this is what we support, there is no comparison. And all it was a 6 or 7 minute discussion on why I would support Trump, but really not supporting Trump, really supporting the platform. Here's the interesting thing, Shaun. Mine wasn't taken down within an hour. Mine was rejected in less than 1 minute in both cases. And so this is why it's a little bit nefarious, and why I wanted to talk to this audience about this. This is not an example of some rogue Facebook employee who says, I want to shut down the grid. I mean, surely we may think we do good work here, but we're not quite high on that radar. There's absolutely No way. I mean, it's impossible. No one could have listened to 6 minutes worth of content in 45 seconds and determined that it was inappropriate. No, this was a Facebook bot. This is an algorithm that they have built for whatever reason that tagged our short, our podcast, and outright rejected it. So technically, I'm not even sure if it was ever posted. It just said that this content has been removed because you violated service, and you can read it as we have it here on the screen, but basically saying that we're trying to mislead people into getting likes. I mean, it was totally garbage. I've appealed it. We'll see what that looks like. But it's clearly they have an algorithm built to reject this. And that is concerning to me. And I did the same thing you did, Shaun. I renamed it. I changed the description. I made it super generic. Again, it was rejected outright. If that's not an example, a prime example of election interference, I'm not sure what is. Maybe we should post a very liberal podcast at one point, Shaun. Maybe a little bit of a satire in the shadow of Babylon Bee, and see if that makes it.
For sure. Well, for the sake of our podcast listeners who don't get a visual for what we're putting on the screen for what they told us, here's the balderdash that they posted to me. It's like, we don't allow people to use misleading links or content to trick people or to visit or stay on a website. Examples of things that we don't allow. So they give 3 bullet points. Telling people that they must like a page to access content to another site. Didn't do that. Using irrelevant pop-ups on websites to prevent people from leaving easily. Didn't do that. Disguising a link as something on our platform, like a poll or video, to get clicks. We didn't do that.
So in my case, it said, it looks like you tried to get likes, follows, shares, or video views in a misleading way. That was what it shared with me.
Your message and the thumbnail are right up front. It completely reflects what the content was. You just didn't grab all the content and put it in the thumbnail.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy.
And it says this goes inside community standards on spam, which is also interesting because I didn't publish it publicly. I only published it privately. Not sure how that's spam, and certainly not sure exactly how I'm trying to mislead people when I'm giving them my opinion.
Right. Yeah. And you're being very upfront about it. Somebody else that I know on Facebook had something that she simply forwarded, and she's done it, probably 10,000 times like the rest of us. And she got one of hers taken down, but she submitted a rebuttal or whatever you call it. And she posted back that it actually, that the action was reversed. She was quite surprised. My reply to her was, AI seems to be very good at making mistakes.
Almost like it was trained to do so. And we could do a whole podcast, Shaun, on AI, but I have listened to some videos. I've read a lot of articles in AI, particularly from conservative folks who said, let's compare, let's ask some questions. And something simple like this: who are the top 10 African-American most famous people in the United States, since our founding? And AI would list that. And then it said, who are the top 10 most influential Caucasians since our founding? And AI said, depending on the platform, said that that's basically a race-baited question, and therefore we're not, we don't distribute that kind of content. Same AI, same platform. It just said, can you list African Americans? Can you list Hispanics? Can you list what Caucasian? And when it got to Caucasians, it was, yeah, we can't do that. That goes against our rules. So why do we say all that? I'm just kind of, bringing us full circle. The election interference is real. We've experienced it now on Facebook. George Soros is making a big move. We already know that in the last election cycle, that all the major media outlets are completely in collusion with the Democratic Party, because they are absolutely hell-bent on making sure that no conservative, and in this case in particular Trump, because they hate Trump, that he can't be put in office. I would say all of that is true. So I actually anticipate in most of these outlets, if you will, I actually anticipate nefarious activity far beyond what it was in 2020. I actually think it's going to
Oh
be
yeah.
worse. The only difference between now and what we experienced in 2020 is that Twitter or X is under Elon Musk, and I don't think he's just not gonna allow this to happen the same way. That's really the only difference. I think the stakes are higher. I think the need for people to have their voice heard is greater. And I am concerned, Shaun, that people's voices are going to absolutely be shut down.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've seen that with a short with the group that, I mean, let's face it, our audience is not really big at this moment. So we're not really a threat to the Democrat cartel at this point, except that we do pray. So maybe that's why. Maybe we really are a lot more effective than even we think we are, because it doesn't take a very big group to pray and see something happen. Um, the cartel. Yeah, I mean, they've got stuff planned. And so my prayer has been, and I want to just toss it out there for any of you who haven't thought about it to consider praying this, but ask the Lord not only to expose all of the schemes, but that the Lord would expose the schemes with enough evidence to bring these people to justice, and just before it's critical, so that they don't have time to scramble and put another fix in before before the election takes place. If they're exposed and there's evidence, then we can bring them to justice when we have somebody with backbone who is willing to do so.
Agreed. Agreed. So, Shaun, I think what I want to say, one of my parting thoughts, I want to commit to this. If Facebook reverses the appeal, we're going to share that. I
Yes.
think we have a duty to do that. We've called them out, but we will also say, hey, they either recognize the mistake or they corrected it nonetheless. If they don't, we're going to talk about that too.
Yeah, and to follow that up, I do it does look like this is a new thing. And so hopefully by us submitting our request for a review, that they're going to be able to get the bugs worked out. So I am hopeful that they will make some sort of an effort to do that, but also recognize that they are desperate, and their hatred for Donald Trump is fueling everything. And folks, what does scripture say? Scripture tells us that we are to hate no man. Hate of a person is sin. Now, we're supposed to hate sin, but we're supposed to love the person. And the Democrat cartel is steeped in hatred, which means they're steeped in sin.
Indeed, that is true. Election interference is real. It's here. The attempt for it to stay here is also real. We're going to keep fighting back. We're going to keep calling it out here on the grid. Till next time.
Till next time.